Good afternoon. There is something very exciting and inspiring that is happening on many university campuses around the world, and I'm so pleased that I get to be a part of this. Thanks to the USAID Geo Center and all of our partners at the YouthMappers Network, and I'm very happy to be telling all of you about all of this today. There is this academic infrastructure around the world at universities that we now have the privilege of bringing to bear in an organized way into what is happening within the OSM community and the HOT community in particular. And university engagement in this whole effort is not necessarily something that's new, but we haven't yet organized ourselves, and we're starting to do that. And that is something really what is exciting. I'm very happy to tell you about this. So what is the opportunity here? Everyone's been talking a lot about the geospatial revolution. Well, that's touched us at universities too in terms of our research and also our teaching. But this other opportunity is the fact that there's 1.8 billion young people in the world. 85% of those live in developing countries, and we have to tap into that. Of course, we're not going to be able to tap into all of them, but where can we find the bright young leaders of the future? Where do we find them? I think often we find them in our universities. And I actually don't believe that young people are the leaders of tomorrow. I believe they're leaders today. And this is one of the things that we're taking advantage of with this opportunity. So the idea really here is to link the supply, as it were, students, to the demand for data and the data producers using the OpenStreetMap platform. And this is something that has a longer history. There's also a literature around it in terms of using citizen scientists and engaging the world's faculty and students as these sensors, as it were, as my good child puts it. But more importantly, making those connections so that the data that does get created is meaningful, that it has authentic use in evidence-based decision-making. And this is where our partner at USAID is essential to this. So everything that we do has an end-use case. And this means that our project-based pedagogy and our design is authentic. And this makes a big difference, as you can see. So that's basically the idea. Who are we? We are actually a consortium of universities, and we enable our students and nurture them to create chapters, which are student organizations on their campuses. And we promote these academic activities. What does a university do? We do education, we do research, we engage with our communities, especially public universities have a mandate to do that. And so this organization of activities around these real-world end-use cases is happening through some very important service learning kinds of models. And in the process, we are creating and also using that data in some cases. We also are promoting the actual analysis, the geospatial analysis of that data, and our partners at West Virginia University, Brent McCusker couldn't be with us today. He's leading that aspect of the program. We are really grateful to have some resources to establish leadership and fellowship opportunities for students, in particular female mappers. That's a very important aspect of this. We do have, actually in some universities, more than 50% of the students are female. So it's very important that we pay explicit attention to that. We also are collaborating with the USAID missions. There's a number of GIS specialists now in about 30 countries. Is that correct, Carrie? And so we're communicating directly with them and collaborating with them to make sure that end-use case is really authentic. In addition to this, there's this research aspect that I mentioned, not only research about GI science, about the data that gets created, such as data uncertainty, these kinds of things, but also studying the impact of our efforts, the program, and also what does that mean for the data-driven decision-making. So we're focusing our efforts on that. And as I said, our structure is a student chapter kind of network. We like the students to be forefront and the leaders. Why is this important? It's because the students can then access the in a university infrastructure, if you're working through a campus recognized society, oftentimes they not only get the legitimacy of their organization, there's a sustainability factor. So when students graduate, that there's others to replace them. They automatically have a faculty mentor. And also in some universities, student organizations can apply for funding to help support some of these activities, their mapathons, their local outreach kinds of efforts. So this is really important that we're using this structure. You've heard our university names. Here you see our logos, Texas Tech, George Washington University, and West Virginia University. We're the founders of this with USAID and the GEO Center. And as Carrie mentioned a moment ago, we launched this program last November in Washington, D.C., and celebrated that at the House of Representatives. But we opened up this consortium in February, which was only 8 months ago. So I think we've hit a nerve. We've resonated with what students want, and they want to be engaged in your community. I think you know this. I think you've had some experience with them, but we're trying to organize this as sort of, I guess you'd say, a community within a community, right? And pay attention to the needs of students and where they are on their campuses and inspire them and guide them on getting involved. So right now, in those 8 months, we've already had 31 universities in 12 countries. It's 31. I didn't talk to you about that. It's not 30. So you see these 28 right here on the map, and the three of us, that's 31 universities, and we are very pleased also with the fact that we have been already collaborating with the HOT community on the establishment of some of these networks, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that when I talk about what projects we're working on. One of the things that we're trying to do is amplify the voices of young people, and we have a blog. If you haven't seen it, it's youthmappers.org/blog, and these voices and the faces that you'll see, a lot of them are young women, and they are welcome to talk about their learning experience. And if you think that this is more than just technology, let me read you the words of one of our students from Bangladesh. She said, "Envisioning the untraveled world through my mapping makes me feel like the global citizen that I am." And this is what she learned through her participation in the program. So we hear that, and we want to amplify that and make sure all of you hear that as well. So what are we doing? What are the projects that we're actually orienting towards? There's sort of a combination. We are sponsored by USAID, and we're paying a lot of attention to these longer-term development kinds of issues that USAID is focused on. Sometimes that has to do with disasters and some of the more urgent humanitarian needs like that you all work on. But one of the things about working in a university is we're kind of slow. We work at a much slower pace than you. And we have semesters, we have deadlines, we have classes. So this is a little bit one of the challenges that we're working our way through, and the timing of all of this and helping to coordinate. So fortunately, we have some really good end-use cases that really for using the data. The one that we're focusing on right now is the malaria prevention through the President's Malaria Initiative. And if you heard Chad Blevins talk earlier this morning, was it this morning? Earlier this morning, you heard a lot about that, and it's been, I think, almost every one of our chapters have been contributing to this particular initiative. We worked in Mozambique last spring, and now we're focusing on Kenya. The other couple of opportunities that we have for our students, we have a virtual internship program where we have 10 students. We had 10 students this summer, and we have 10 students right now who are working with Chad directly on an internship where they actually work for USAID and creating data. They're a little bit more experienced mappers. There's a couple of projects that they're working on, one in Indonesia with the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, working around the active volcano there. I think you've heard some talk about that, as well as Carrie mentioned the work in the Mekong region to map where the dams and reservoirs are. So our interns are working on these kinds of things. They're also making those connections with the chapters and students in these places. In addition to the remote mapping kinds of activities, we also have supported some local capacity building with students, and there are 5 projects going on right now. One, we are working with Map Kibera in Kenya to involve the University of Nairobi chapter. Where is Zach? Is he here? Give a shout out to Map Kibera. And another one is in Bangladesh, where we have 3 universities that are creating data that is being used with the disaster preparation and also Feed the Future, some base fundamental data there. We're working in Uganda on community resilience. There's an area, a remote region, Karamoja region, where we've had some field work as well as remote mapping with students in Uganda. We have 4 universities now working in that country. Carrie also mentioned to you, and you'll hear from Umberto, the historic process going on in Colombia. We actually have 5 universities in Colombia. They are super. And in one day, there was a competition that Umberto organized, and one day they finished 100% of that task. It was amazing. We're in the validation process on that right now. They're also being leaders and collaborating with our community in Panama and the Spanish-speaking community in the United States. And finally, I need to mention Ghana, which is actually the very, very first university who emailed me and signed up and said, we want to be a part of this. It wasn't a U.S. university, it was University of Cape Coast in Ghana. And they're working on food security there. Something interesting that happens at our universities in the United States, we have international students. We call them international students. They come from many countries around the world to study in the United States. And this is an amazing resource, and we've already seen their contributions in this network. We have a USAID supported fellow on the Borlaug program. It's not through our program, but he's a graduate student from Ghana, and now he's incorporating his work into this work that we're doing, and we're sort of synergizing these things. There's a lot of potential. It's just kind of one example that you can see in making those connections. And those connections, as it turns out, is what is really fundamental about this. We're working across the different scales of academia, from our local campuses to our communities, especially public universities at our state level, and realizing this mission of the university to create global citizens. Something interesting that happens in that process is universities already have this structure to reach out to local schools. There's this educational pathway, as we like to call it. So we've been dabbling in that. We can't stop the chapters from reaching out to their high schools. They're really excited about this. And so it's another way that we're working with schools and basically activating that whole infrastructure of the academic sector, inside and outside of the classroom. And Nuala's going to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so there's different ways that you can engage students. There's obviously in these student chapters that Patricia has just talked about, which are created by students, they're run by students, they're doing this work independently and voluntarily, which is amazing. The other way of engaging and interacting with students is obviously through traditional classes. And increasingly, we at our department, and I know other colleagues that I've talked to, are incorporating open source into traditional classes, in traditional GIS classes, remote sensing classes, and then classes that are not technical at all. And we think it's a really good way to introduce people to this technology. It might start them in a career in GIS, but it just might also give them a very useful tool within public health, within policy. So the model that we have at our university at GW is we started to have these little modules where students were actually graded on particular projects. And we started working on this with USAID back in 2013. And what we do is we actually set up a project, we have a partner come in and brief the students on the work that they do. They have quotas to work to, and then we actually validate the work afterwards. So we kind of call them the captive crowd because there's an expectation from them. But many of these students go on and they form the societies, and that's actually where our society at GW got its start. And the society comes back and they help us train the new students in the classes. So it's students helping students to learn and students going on to become leaders. So there's a really good way to capture both in the formal sense and outside. And we started an initiative called the TeachOSM project that started with university instruction, but we're actually starting to explore beyond there. And we're starting to put up materials to help new instructors that want to put this this into their curriculum, putting up things like our syllabus, information from the modules. So if anybody wants to reach out through that, it's also part of what YouthMappers are doing going forward. And if you've done anything interesting in your classes, if you are teachers, you need not be formally within third level, but if you want to share successful case studies of how you've had structured learning, we would love to feature that on TeachOSM. Everybody here knows the OSM tasking manager, that game changer for us when we first started to try and have 100 students work on a project and no way to collaborate. But as time went on, we felt that some of the things we worked on, we didn't want to constantly bug the hot community to put tasks on the tasking manager. So we worked with them, and they enabled us to fork that into something called the Teach Tasking Manager. And somebody I spoke to yesterday gave it a really good name, and they call it like the sandbox, okay? It's where an instructor can set up a task for an area that they're interested in. And it might not be disaster development, red hot task, but it's definitely somewhere that needs to be mapped. And they want to kind of sidle off a little group. So it works and, has the same look and feel as HOT. And if you want a project manager access, you just email info at the info email associated and just tell us a little bit about what you want to do, and we will give you access. So you can experience what it is like to use that tool, but we're not kind of adding our work to the tasking manager. And why do we do this, and why do I think this is applicable outside of geography, even though I am a geography teacher? It crosses so many fields, and we actually feel it's drawing students to our department from other departments: data science, public health, public policy, international affairs, and it really helps them work together and start to think outside the box. I think service learning is the best way to teach something within a class, especially technology that sometimes can be very dry, very terse. But if you've got an application and it's not a made-up one, it's actually a real project where the students can reach out and talk to a partner. Chad comes and talks to our classes. Carrie has come and talked to classes for Patricia. It's really, really wonderful. They have a sense of, worth, that this data they're creating is real and it's not something that's just going to be shelved. And it's also very marketable. I think the days of proprietary GIS are numbered, but we like our students to be well-rounded, and they need to know both things. And I think it just makes them a very, very well-rounded scholar.
And as I mentioned before, it goes beyond the data, beyond the classroom. There's an army of intellectuals in training that have to create dissertations and theses. And one of the things that is very promising about this is that I think maybe in 4 years you might see a few more OSM-related dissertations and theses and helping knowledge being created around this. One of the activities that our collaborator Brent, you see him down there presenting the certificate to the University of Pretoria, is to link the students and the counterparts in these other countries so that they learn from each other, including the international students, and do that in a way that it can inspire them so that their graduate student research activities can sort of take off from that. The students are actually already filling in the gaps for our own research as well. So I want to end with, actually this is not the ending because I have to talk about the partners, but I wanted to make sure you all are aware of the fact that we have launched a call for applications. So if you have a chapter near you, they will hear it from you first. I haven't publicized because I need to be back at my desk to take all the questions that are going to come surely from this. But we've launched the Leadership Fellows Initiative, which will find and support the students from among our chapters who have ideas about leadership and the potential to be leaders in their communities and in their chapters to come to Nepal. Nepal, with the KLL, they have a lot of experience. Their students there have a lot of experience to share. And we'll spend a week there next spring, not only teaching them some additional technical skills, but things like how to communicate science, how to organize your groups, and these other kinds of things that they will learn from each other and from our faculty as well. They will turn in a final report. All of our chapters, they're supposed to turn in their final reports at the end of this year, and we'll also be doing some recognition of some of the good work that the students and individuals have done. And coming next year, perhaps even later this year, we're also releasing a campaign for Let Girls Map, which is our female mappers initiative that's linked to the Let Girls Learn campaign of Michelle Obama. And we'll have some research fellowships happening next year. So just to know what the students get from being a part. There is no cost, obviously, to becoming a part of this. It's for any university around the world. I had a lot of questions earlier about that. We are focused in the U.S. because that's where we're from, and we're also focused in many of the countries where USAID works. So some of our resources are for those eligible countries, but we welcome chapters from any university around the world. We do have a number of partnerships that's already growing, some very specific ways that we're working with the HOT community. We mentioned the task manager, we mentioned the local capacity building work that we're working with many of you on, but also coming as soon as there's a new hire at the HOT offices, we will have some designated recognition of the chapters with a HOT designation for chapters that raise funds, that particularly participate in those humanitarian activities. We're also working on credentialing kinds of things. In the academic world, credentials are very important. There's things like micro-credentials. So we're working with AGS on the geo badges and also the UCGIS on understanding what are the competencies. We have to legitimize the work that they do, that they're really actually learning. We're working with them to do that and making sure that for the GISP, the professional designation, that all of the hours count for that portfolio. And we're also working with Mapillary. They're offering an education package so that our universities can use their tools, and we're very, very pleased with the response that they have had to this community. So if you have anyone that would like to learn more about this, we're happy to talk to you more. And you can go to our website. I'd like to just leave you, I guess, with our tagline that we don't just build maps, we build mappers. Thank you. How are we on time? Do you want to do questions right now, or no? Yeah. Okay. Do we? Yeah. One or two quick questions before we move on to Noah. Right. It comes in many kinds of different ways. We've left it kind of open, so it can be an existing student group, say if you're a geography club or you're another club that already exists, and they can just show us that they exist at the university. They send us the letter that says that, yes, you're a campus organization, and they can just affiliate. If a group of students don't already have a club, we will help them through that process. We have some founding documents that we can give as a model. We can set them up with students who've done this at their own campuses to try to help them through that process. But it is important that we get some kind of indication from the university, whether it's their faculty advisor, whether it's their actual creation documents, or whatever it is that that university uses to just recognize that this is a student group affiliated with that university. That helps us know that they can access some of the resources that universities can provide. It's a legitimizing kinds of thing. They can sometimes get funding from the university. So we will help them do that if they don't have that yet. But if you already have a group, you can just affiliate. Thank you.